She wipes her cheeks of phantom tears. What's on tonight? It's trauma and fear. Gaze into the black mirror with eyes to see. It couldn't be clearer. Oh, oh, we hold these truths, you know. Oh, we've got the proof. Oh, you know the thing. Pour yourself some discernment, my friend. Distractions and traumas. One begins before the other ends. Say no, reject the lies. The truth is imperative. That's why we're reframing the narrative.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Reframing the Narrative, and we are so excited to have special guest Jeanice Barcelo here with us today, author of many books and great work on her website as well, but she'll tell us more about that as we get into this conversation. Without further ado, Jeanice, so awesome, so glad to have you as a guest. Thank you for joining us today for this conversation. And I think a good starting point would be, just as we talked about offline, maybe tell our listeners a little bit about you and kind of how you became aware of many of the things that you've been writing about, including like hospital trauma, circumcision, ultrasound, all these really important topics you've been writing about. Like, just get us started. What kind of opened your eyes to some of these traumas that happen within the medical system and in our world? And, what have you been writing and telling people about basically what they can do about it?
Well, I came into this work basically from my own birth trauma and from witnessing what they were doing to my baby while she was trapped in a neonatal intensive care unit. And the horror, the absolute horror of what I witnessed them doing to her, well, really caused deep, deep PTSD, obviously, and the loss of my marriage, and my whole life collapsed as a result. And they love that. Like, they love breaking up families and basically destroying love in whatever way that they can. And the easiest way to make that happen is through extreme trauma being inflicted, especially on babies, as they're trying to come into this world. And of course, inflicting similar trauma on the parents to put them into a state of dissociation, basically, where their soul leaves the body and they can't step into their power to protect their child. This is especially important for the men, and I'll go into this a little deeper when we talk about circumcision, which absolutely causes dissociation in our men and is an extreme disempowerment of the male energy. So that's what started me on this path. At some point when I was looking at the protocols of hospital birth, I was doing this at the same time I was reading like David Icke's work and beginning to understand trauma-based mind control. And I said, you know what? Every single protocol of hospital birth mirrors the techniques of trauma-based mind control. Every single protocol. Okay. Now, I think that I was probably in a lifetime prior to this one, part of a satanic cult. And that is why I understood immediately that what I was looking at was trauma-based mind control. And I understood why they were doing each of these things, like what exactly these things were doing. I never read this in a book. Okay, I never had anybody teach me this. This is something I must have come in knowing, and that must have happened from another lifetime of somehow participating in this. My instinct tells me I was a breeder. I was used as a breeder to give birth to children who were then sacrificed by this cult. And that's why I've had 5 pregnancies and none of them ended in a live birth, and all of them basically ended up as sacrifices, right? Two of them very visibly were sacrifices to the medical establishment, not just my baby in the neonatal intensive care unit who didn't make it, but I also had a prior pregnancy where I don't want to go too deep into this, but my husband at the time was adopted. And he had a lot of ambivalence about pregnancy and birth, obviously, from his own unresolved birth trauma. And so he had a low sperm count. And we had a hard time conceiving. And I made the mistake of going for artificial insemination. Basically, they tell my husband to go jack off in a masturbatorium and give them his sperm. They spin it, and then they put it up into my vagina, into my cervix, right? This white coat guy comes up. So I went through all this crap and took a bunch of drugs to hyperovulate. And what they failed to tell me is that the drugs cause birth defects in the babies. And so I had a deformed baby. This was many, many years ago. I found out in the 5th month after many ultrasounds because I was high risk after miscarrying twice. In any event, I did choose to abort that child because I didn't understand what abortion was. I didn't know that they were going to burn my baby to death in my womb. Okay, I didn't know that. And so I have a lot of spiritual consequences for that choice. And obviously, it affected my womb and it affected previous births. And that's what we need to understand about abortion is that it does affect things in a very, very deep way when we choose to murder our children. And most people aren't choosing it because their babies are deformed and they're being told their babies aren't going to survive. They're choosing it because they want to go on having sex um, without taking any responsibility for the creation of life. So this is something we need to strongly look at in our highly sexualized culture. And the same cult that controls the medical establishment is also controlling the porn industry and the push for sex education, for children as young as 4 and 5, to get them to start engaging in hedonistic sexual activity that will then lead to a bunch of unwanted children and many abortions and extreme spiritual pain and consequences in their lives. And this is all very, very calculated and methodical. And I did a talk in 2016 about the path they took to manipulate human sexuality, the social engineering that's involved in the manipulation of human sexuality, and the price that we've paid. We can see um, the dysfunction in families, a lot of false unions. Okay, people that really don't belong together. They come together based on sexual attraction. They have sex because they think this is normal. It's not, okay? It's not normal what we're doing, and it's really harmful. It's harmful to us, it's harmful to the children that we create. So we got to get on this, okay? Sorry to end up going there, but it's part of my past. So I want you to understand really where I'm coming from. By the time, if and I was one of these babies, okay, that came in through teenage parents who had sex at a drive-in movie theater in a car, okay? So obviously this was really not a great conception. My parents were not matched. Okay, this was not a true union, and I was not wanted. And there are billions of us who were not wanted and who suffer as a result of being not wanted because we are then imprinted with a sense that we are inherently unlovable and that we will never be loved. And this is a very painful imprint to carry with you for your life and the difficulties that are going to be encountered as a result of relationship challenges are going to occur as a result of us feeling we're not lovable. That gets translated to people that come into our field and they will confirm you're not lovable. Okay. This is how it is. This is how trauma can really destroy our lives. And the dark side knows this, and that's why they're encouraging all this sexual behavior and all these unwanted children and all the abortions and all. By the time we get to the birth, after being in a womb that's toxic, parents fighting, parents taking drugs, drinking alcohol, eating shit, surrounding themselves with all kinds of poisons, drugs, the whole nine yards. By the time we get to the birth, the likelihood of that birth being a good one is pretty much nil. Okay, this goes for both the parents and the baby. It's going to be a tough birth, especially if the baby's not wanted. The mother is not going to have an easy time giving birth to a child she does not want. Okay, so all of this begins preconception. Okay, this is really where we need to start, and we need to follow through to the ramifications, what gets outpictured because of we're creating life. All right. So my experience is huge in what I'm doing and what I'm talking to you about today. By the time we do get to birth and we see the babies are being born deformed, the babies are ending up in NICU, the mothers are miscarrying their children, babies are dying in the womb en masse right now, thanks to all the radiation that they're being exposed to through ultrasound and through the parental use of wireless devices. It is incredible if any of these kids make it out of the womb alive. That's number one. Number two, their genetics from all the radiation exposure are going to be in serious question. And we know that autistic children have on average 72 de novo genetic mutations. De novo means new. The mutations have never existed in the family lines before they're showing up for the first time in the children who have them. So these genetic mutations are radiation induced. They're either caused by early exposure to radiation, which all babies are now because of parental use of wireless devices and because of ultrasound scans, which is also radiation. I've written a 500-page book on this topic to bring forth the truth. Of course, my books have been totally censored. But the other way that the mutations happen is because the sperm and the egg of the parents have genetic mutations. And that's from carrying cell phones near your genitals and being chronically exposed to Wi-Fi, smart meters, living near cell towers. We've got very serious problems with this technology. And the technology, of course, is instrumental in the birth process. It's instrumental in harming the children and the parents. It's instrumental in breaking families apart and making sure there's no strong bonded families because, strong families are the foundation for a healthy civilization. So we can't have any of that. We can't have truly loving bonded families. No, they're going to seek to destroy that wherever they can and whenever they can. And they do. And they do it through prenatal care, which is absolutely abuse. And they do it through the hospital birth process, which is extreme, extreme torture and trauma. So I came into this through my own experience. I lived this firsthand, everything I'm just talking to you about. And my understanding goes, well, it's from studying the effects of prenatal and birth trauma on the lives of the adults, okay? And also from understanding the reasons for each of these protocols, like what they're really doing with each. Like I just wrote a comment on one of my Substacks today. We were talking about Sire G, who I think has been replaced, of Green Med Info, and his ex-wife, Kelly Brogan. And it's a shame because those two were a beautiful couple. But Kelly came out at one point to say she's into S&M sex. I think she publicly said this. And I think based on my research, sadism and masochism can be triggered through the induction of labor. All right, these tendencies can be triggered in people and children who become adults that were induced. Induction of labor is basically a forced premature birth. right? And the medical establishment forces these babies to be born through a series of extremely harmful drugs and other abusive things to make their emergence into the world as painful as possible. Okay. And we have at least 1 out of 3 children in the United States that are induced. All right. Their birth is induced. And it's probably more, but these are the statistics that were available when I wrote my birth trauma book in 2014. Okay, 1 out of 3. It might be much more right now. So we also see young people cutting themselves and doing all kinds of self-harm, which is not something that's been common before. And I'm quite certain that this is connected to the abuse that they are suffering through the birth process, the extreme violence that they're suffering. And if we go just a little deeper into the induction of labor, I want to stress that in a normal birth, the babies will signal the mother that they're ready to be born. And then the mothers will start producing the neurochemicals of birth. So the baby has dominion or should have dominion over the timing of its birth, but they hijack that. And they do that so that they can impress upon the psyche of that child that you do not have dominion over your life. We will decide when you're going to be born, what your life is going to be like. You will comply with what we decide should happen. Okay, all of this is on a very unconscious level, but nevertheless, this is part of why they are doing the induction. What's an induction? It's a ritual. It's a ritual initiation for people who are about to service the dark side. Okay, police are inducted into the police academy. Military people are inducted into the military. The induction is a purposeful word that these babies are being initiated into a dark cult through the process of hospital birth. And that's what the whole process is. It's one ritual after another ritual after another ritual, all of them abusive. The drugs
Wow.
that are
So
given to, go ahead. Yes, please.
no, sorry. Finish your thought. Go ahead.
No, because I can talk. I'll be talking. Please ask your
No, there's so much there to unpack, and that was a great intro. But I agree with you. There's so many systems set up to confuse and subjugate the general population, and one of them that I just wanted to touch on that you touched on briefly, which is the hypersexualization of our culture. And I think about Kinsey and how much he's been lauded as this great thinker in modern society. And it's when you actually go back and look at the history of Kinsey, he was doing really sick things to children 5 8 years 5 and below, and trying to sexualize them and then report that as real science. And it's disgusting, but it's part of what really ramped up what we saw from his time forward. And you're right, it's like, if I remember what it's like when I was a child, and then in high school and college, it was like, how fast can you get rid of your virginity? It was like it was a curse, right? You had to be experienced, and you had
especially for
to.
boys.
Yes, absolutely. And that's just, I mean, Kinsey started it, and I know that there were people before him, so he wasn't the sole perpetrator, but certainly society has built on that. And it has led to all the things that you were just describing, and including abortion, which now is viewed by many as just a lifestyle choice. Like, I don't want to have a kid right now. It's an inconvenience, but it is destructive, and it's destructive mentally, physically, spiritually, and it's something we.
Spiritually, extremely
Yes,
harmful.
absolutely. And
Extreme.
one other question I'd like to just pose back to you. You brought up the radiation exposure leading to potential autism. How do you
Oh,
see
yeah.
that? How do you see that relating to all of the vaccines that children are given straight out of the womb? How do those things play together? Because certainly that's been a subject of debate, and I'm not sure if that's a red herring. I mean, we know that vaccines are toxic in their own right, but is that vaccines equal autism thing that RFK and other people like him have been putting out there sort of its own little false flag? Is there more to this story? I'd just love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, there's much more to the story that they're not wanting people to pay attention to, which involves the radiation exposure. Okay. The vaccines are clearly part of the problem because we have, thousands and thousands of parents that can attest that after a vaccine, their child went over the edge into autism. Okay, so the vaccines are a big problem. What's not being talked about is that a huge amount of the brain damage, the genetic damage, the neurological damage is being laid in the womb through ultrasound scans, through Doppler fetal heart monitors, which are also ultrasonic, and through parental use of wireless devices. These frequencies, these radiation emitting frequencies that do not belong on the earth, are short circuiting the electrical system of our children's bodies. It's creating immense neurological damage. We have to understand that we are electrical beings. So when you come in with an ultrasound scan, you're electroshock torturing these babies, and the babies will be demonstrating that they're bothered by spinning around or holding up their hands to try to block what's coming in, or going like this to try to block the noise. Okay, people say, oh, how cute. No, it's not cute. These children are in extreme distress from this technology that was created as a weapon. Ultrasound is a weapon. Okay, it has always been from its inception a weapon. It's a military weapon that was used in the Navy for 100 years already, okay, or more. The Navy's out there with their sonar, which is ultrasound and infrasound, okay? And the whales and dolphins are beaching themselves with brain hemorrhages. They are dying in mass from this technology. And that's what they're trying to do with it. Okay, is to kill, is to destroy, is to mutate, is to morph, deform, and upset God's creations. We're dealing with beings, creatures who are anti God, who are anti life, who hate mankind, and who take great delight in harming us and our world. It's time we face this fact. Okay, these are demonic entities. They're not like us. They're capable. I'm just going to be really direct. We can see what they're capable of by looking at what's happening in Gaza. Okay, that's not normal to have that kind of extreme aggression's not a strong enough word. It's like this hatred of living beings that's completely uncalled for. Like, where does this hideous hatred come from that you could conceive of such abusive things to do to
I
innocent people?
I totally agree there, and it just when you really think about war, what is being accomplished, and certainly this isn't war in the sense that two sides willingly said they were going to go to battle. I mean, obviously there were a lot of false flags to kick off this whole engagement and this genocide, but that being said, and I know that I've made this comment in a past episode of ours, but I think it's worth revisiting. How do people get so desensitized that they think it's okay to murder others under the banner of a political system? Like, that just makes no logical sense. Murder is murder is murder. And Jake, it looks like you've got a comment there. You've been very patient and quiet this whole time. Why don't you carry that on?
Well, I think it comes very from a very early age when you're taught that everybody hates you, that you're special, and you should rise up and kill first. That's literally what Israeli children are taught, and they're traumatized as well, right? They're taught that everybody hates you, they want to wipe you off the map, and it's
Of
manifest
course,
in
just
this.
the reverse is true.
Of course, it's an inversion. I mean, just look at the six-pointed
Yeah.
star. It's an inversion of up is down and down is up. Um, but I think we're getting at something as well, like how do medical professionals get inducted into this and play out these rituals and exert these traumas on people as well. If you go back to their medical training, that's trauma-based mind control as well. I'm sure Janice has observed that. Medical school is sleep deprivation, it's rote memorization, it's the pressure of all the loans that you've taken out, all the debts you've gone into, and that's trauma inducing as well. And so people go into it feeling that they're going to be doing good, and yeah, they're going to make money from it. But how do you get people to go along with all of this abuse? They, at some level, have to be tricked into believing that they're doing good. It's for your own good, right? And you'll find the same thing going on. I think it's interesting that we're paralleling a whole system with something going on in the Middle East that everybody with eyes can see is observing with Gaza and the genocide going on there. It's just
No,
people believe that they have a justification for it no matter what. And doctors think they're doing good, but they've been inducted, to use that word again, into this similar to a clergy. They wear robes too, they wear the medical smock, and that's kind of like a clergy. And so they're perpetuating all these things that Janice has articulated and enumerated here.
so, for example, Chabad Lubavitch Jews are taught not to think with their heart, to turn off their feelings, to think only with their brain, to think with their mind, to make decisions that are not based on any feelings whatsoever. What we don't want is the Jewish people to connect with the part of them that makes them kind and loving. That's what their overlords do not want and will do everything to knock it out of them. Circumcision is a fundamental part of this, okay? Because the extreme genital torture of an infant, a helpless infant, that causes that infant to dissociate. You know what dissociation is? When the body is undergoing such extreme trauma, the soul says, the soul's very sensitive. It's going to say, I can't take this. I got to get out. I'm leaving the body right now. And the soul goes. This doesn't happen to every person, but a baby that can dissociate will dissociate. Okay, that soul will leave the body. And it's at that time that alter entities can be called into the body that will be in service to the dark side. That's what they're looking for. That's even what they're trying to do in part with ultrasound, is to get those babies to dissociate. Okay, so that they can call in alter entities before that baby even gets out of the womb. And all of this is written about in my book, including the mind control of medical students, that, medical training is a form of trauma-based mind control, 100%. These students are, one of the stories I share in my book is of a student who was in vet school, and she was forced to witness a class called Learned Helplessness, where they would bring a dog in every day, put the dog in this tank of water. Okay, the dog would swim and swim. If it went to the side, it would be electroshocked from touching the side. It couldn't save its own life. Um, and just at the point where the dog was ready to give up and die, they would take the dog out of there and bring him back the next day and do it again. And the students had to witness this over and over again. The students had to witness horrific things like bringing a cow in, for example, and putting a female cow in a brace that she couldn't back up or move forward or anything, and having each student come forward and shove their entire arm into her vagina, allegedly,
There's
so that they could feel the. It's insane. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's just interesting that there's so much of this animal torture in our history that people don't realize existed, and we touched on this a little bit last week when we were talking about the cult of pharmakia. It's
Hmm.
the actual pharmacopoeia book back in the 1800s had many of these, I'll call them spells, not even procedures. And to me, I don't see that there's any rational reason for torturing animals and coming up with remedies for humans, but it existed, and clearly there's been many forms of this throughout our recorded history. And I think it does go back to your comment that there really are people who are desensitized or spiritually devoid in some way, that they think that's all okay and the betterment for humanity. But again, I feel the same way about war. It's like you have to be desensitized on some level, some deep level, to think it's okay to kill. Like, it doesn't, at the end of the day, politics are just politics. A government is a government, and they're never in the best interest of the people anyway. So I don't get people willingly killing others in the name of some flag. It just makes no sense. Just like torture makes no sense on any level to me.
Well, that, when you get the media also controlled by the same cult, okay, repeating over and over again, follow the science. Science is Satanism. It's always been Satanism. It's been involved in animal torture since its inception. In fact, the only government that ever stood up to this and totally banned it was Nazi Germany. Hitler's Germany banned this kind of activity. Vivisection was 100% banned. They had all kinds of animal rights laws in Nazi Germany. And of course, this guy was made out to be the worst person in the world. Why? Because he kicked out the Rothschild banks, because he created his own currency, because Germany rose from extreme destitution, like what they're trying to do to our country right now, where parents were selling their children in order to buy bread. All right, they went from that to being the most prosperous country on the earth in 5 years after Hitler came to power.
You bring up a interesting point about breaking the mind control. What does that look like to you for, I guess, first within the so-called truth community, and then beyond that, the public at large? Like, I mean, it's obvious to me, just turn off the TV, right? Don't pay the your attention to mainstream media. But it's not as simple for a lot of people. So, what does your solution look like to really get people to see the world as it really is?
Nobody is going to be happy with my solution. But I will say for me, it did start with turning off the TV in 1989. I haven't watched television since 1989. So the mind control will begin to break down when you do that. Right now, we're in a situation where we're being controlled through frequency, through the wireless grid. Okay. So, first of all, I don't have a single wireless device. I don't own a cell phone. I don't use any wireless devices. Even my vehicle is old so that I can avoid Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Okay, so those are choices that we can make. I'm talking to you on a wired computer. My phone is an internet phone. If I'm not online, leave a message. I'll call you back when I get online. I'm not available 24/7. So what? Okay. My solution really is shut down the wireless grid. Okay. I think a nice EMP pulse from our sun that short circuits and fries the entire wireless grid. I'm not talking about the whole electric grid. I'm talking about the wireless grid. We need to be specific because we don't want to go into complete overload, with losing the ability to heat our houses and stuff like this. Okay. Shutting down the wireless grid would create chaos. Okay. But it would also immediately cause people to snap out of the frequency induced trance that they're in by using the wireless devices. The technology that's in people's bodies from the jabs, okay, would immediately become dormant because it's based on wireless frequencies to give it instructions, right, how to grow. Okay, so that would immediately become dormant. Um, their entire control system would immediately be dead without the wireless grid. Okay, it depends on us to keep it going. And we keep it going by using wireless devices. And I don't see mankind turning away from them. Many people
I
know they're
wonder
dangerous. Yeah.
I wonder, have you gone down the voice to skull rabbit hole? Like, not only are we being bombarded by this radiation, but it seems like it's also infiltrating our minds and in our psyche in some way, and I think there's good evidence for that. I'd be curious to know if you've looked into that, and literally just saw an example of that this past weekend when I had a car situation and I had to deal with it quickly. I was talking to my wife about it, and then a day later, she's getting emails to her work and personal about this company that she would have never searched for herself. So there's all this communication going on
Hmm.
wirelessly.
Hmm.
Phones are listening. I mean, where do you stand on that, and how deep does that rabbit hole go from your point of view?
Well, coming back to the voice to skull question, that basically works on bone conduction. So when you're hit with these frequencies, which are all in the ultrasonic range, okay, every cell phone is emitting ultrasound. All your apps are ultrasonic. So this is a combination of electromagnetic radiation and acoustic radiation that people are getting hit with. And the acoustic radiation basically causes the bones are crystalline in nature. So it causes the bones to vibrate. Okay. Literally, the bones begin to morph and deform and expand and contract in response to the assault from these frequencies. And it is through the manipulation of the skull bones, okay, that they can create the sounds that do the voice to skull stuff. Okay. If you don't have any of this in your environment, I don't see how they can get to you unless you've been injected, because then you've got the technology in you. Okay. And you've got to work to get it out. It may be that all of us have the technology in us. So, what's the solution for us? Get rid of every single wireless device in our homes so that that technology cannot receive the signals to grow. And we have a much better chance of survival and not being manipulated through these technologies. That's the only solution I see, is to get rid of the wireless stuff. And it would instantly, cause the whole earth to breathe a sigh of relief. These technologies are killing birds, insects, and animals in mass. I mean, millions are dropping dead out of the sky in the US alone.
And everything you were
So,
pointing out points to the, like you said, the electrical nature of everything. We are electric beings, and water is affected, water being the essence of all life. If you look into the work of the Japanese researcher Emoto, and then on through like Veda Austin and Arthur Furstenberg's work and Gerald Pollack's work on the body electric, really, and how water is also a similar force. And we're getting to something that's it's the solution is, it has always been with us, that we need to connect with our own kind of magnetism and electricity, not something that's non-native to our world. And I want to go back to something that you mentioned at the very start in your opening. You mentioned that men and women aren't getting together under a true union. And just the fact that we're on our, we have the phrase left to our own devices, which is kind of an ironic phrase these days
isn't
with
it?
our various devices, right? That separates us. And then we have all the other things that are separating us from true union. In fact, like the feminization of boys, the accentuation of women trying to be men. Yes, they're hooking up, they're still having sex, but there's no bonding going on. Therefore, the state steps in as the parent. So we're really missing that, in that connection on a, maybe it is like an electrical level or something. And all of these forces are separating those bonds, as well as between ourselves as people, but also I believe on a greater level, and I'm sure PJ agrees, with our creator, because the essence of
That's the point.
everything goes back to that. Yeah, exactly. We're we're
That's the
we're
point.
hiding God, right? Yeah.
There's a forced separation between us and God, and also between us and our soul being a direct link. to God. Okay. And our soul communicates with us through our feelings. We can know more in a millisecond what's actually happening through a sensation in our body than weeks and months of thinking about it with our minds. That's the fact. Okay. Our feelings are a direct communication from our soul. Our soul has a direct link to the divine mind, to the creator. Okay. That is what they're trying to break. And the vaccines are all part of that. Okay. The technology is all part of this, of their attempt to basically hijack our souls and create machines that will be in service to them. So what do? We say, fuck you. I'm not using your machines. I am not going to be a machine. I am not willing to enter your technocratic world. And mark my words, because I really think this is going to happen. Their overlords, who I believe are the Anunnaki, okay, are going to make themselves known over the next couple of months. And they're going to present, all this stuff about that Atlas thing, okay, 31A, whatever it is, comet. They're going to make themselves known and they're going to present themselves as our saviors. All right, follow us and we'll give you all this great technology. They're the ones who gave us all this great technology to begin with. What they forgot to mention is that the technological world has been a trap from its inception. It has been designed to trap us. Okay, so that we will be in service to them, and we bloody well have been, haven't we? We're on
It,
a treadmill of total bullshit that has nothing to do with what we came here to do. We're just now beginning to figure out what we can do to help God and this earth.
amen to that. And, it's interesting because I was going to ask before you said it. We just have a couple weeks and a couple months before the close of 2025, and I feel like we haven't seen the big shoe drop yet. There's been many talking about this year, the golden age, etc., of the great enlightened teacher, what have you, Alice Bailey and others who've been saying it for decades. So I feel like there's something big coming, and maybe it could be a nothing burger, and I'll have egg on my face. But back in January when Jake and I started this podcast, we were talking about the year to come, and we all had our bingo cards out, wondering where we were going to put our markers down. But that being said, I don't know that I'm with you 100% on the Anunnaki part, because I personally believe we live in an enclosed system. But I think that some big act is coming, and I think that some grand savior or some event that'll make the Charlie Kirk psyop look like child's play. I think that something big is coming, but they do these trial psyops to see how many people fell for it, and Charlie Kirk was an example of people falling for it. So was COVID in 2020. People put face diapers on and lost their minds when other people didn't have their diapers on. We saw all sorts of behavior from people we never would have expected. So I think every time people bite on something that's obviously just insane at its surface level, they go, okay, the next one's going to be going forward as planned. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if some big reveal happens before the close of the year. And if it doesn't, that's great. I'm happy that no big psyop that
Yes,
changes our world in another way
I feel like
happens. But
we're at there's two paths that are opening up. There are two divergent paths, okay? And we choose which path we're going to take. Are we going to take the path that's going to be presented to us, the technocratic path, okay, to go into an environment where these entities are going to, I think they're going to present, like, we'll give you housing, jobs, everybody will have their income from our government. They're going to present themselves as our savior, and some people will take that route. They'll go into the smart cities, right? Everything will be technological, and they'll have that experience. And I guess that's a valid experience if people want to see what that's about. If the soul wants to see what that's about, but they will lose the connection to their soul because of the technology. That's the whole point of the technology. And there's this other path that I call the new earth, where we restore God's beautiful design. We do our part to restore that, including our part to restore the creation of life in the most sacred and profoundly love-filled way. All right, so that the children who are being brought here are brought here truly in God's image and truly through parents that deeply love each other and want to bring their love into eternity through the creation of life, right? This is God's program. God's program was never designed for women to experience pain. No animal experiences pain unless they're in captivity. Okay, all animals give birth with ease, and mankind was designed for birth to happen with great joy and deep love and, a very meaningful, deeply bonding experience so that the family would be strong. In fact, that's really where a family begins, is when a child gets born, right? Through the creation of two people that love each other. So that's another path that we can choose. Say no to the technological stuff and walk back into God's world. All this technological world is basically overlaid, right? It's a toxic overlay onto what's beautiful and natural. Everything the technological world represents is poisonous. It's toxic. It's harmful. Certainly, we can create structures like I lived in Hawaii for 11 years, and I saw some of the Hawaiian structures pre the US takeover, right? And they're built out of nature, right? There's places all over this world where structures are built out of nature instead of built out of this metal and toxic and plastic and, everything that's bad for us and bad for the earth. We have the capacity to live a life in accordance with God's dream and to contribute to the fulfillment of love on this earth by following God's design. And that's what God's asking us to do, and that's what we have to choose to do. Or we have to choose the other path. I'm not making anybody wrong here. You want to go down technology? Have at it, friends. I don't know how long you'll be around, but give it your best shot, you know?
I think
Uh,
there are ample examples of what creativity looked like pre-reset, and I do believe that there was a big reset before this quote unquote modern industrial age that we live in. And certainly you look at some of the old world structures, and it's hard to deny that creativity and engineering was so much better back when humanity was in touch with nature and God's design. And
exactly.
did the reset happen? And there's many theories on that, but everything just got ugly and depressing, and was everything was built with a short-term mindset. And it's just very clear that I actually think that even some of the great classical music came from that pre-reset time, and you could just hear just human ingenuity at its best in concert and symphony. And I think that there's so much to learn from that in this other path that you're describing.
You know, um, I'm reminded of a scene in the Ringing Cedars books where I recommend these books like the most important books on the planet, okay? And if you want more information, please email me at JaniceBarcelo@yahoo.com. Don't just go buy the books because there is a corrupted edition, but these are very, very important books. There's a scene in the books where Vladimir, the author, says, "Is there life on other planets?" And she says, "Yes." And he says, "Can you show me?" And she does show him, and they're not there with their bodies, but they're able to see these entities that look like us, but they're not like us. They have no feelings. And everything around on their where they live, okay, is all machines. Everything is machines. There's no grass, there's no life. It's all machinery, okay? And the way that they create babies is exactly what they're doing with artificial reproductive technologies. They create children by taking genetics from two different entities, putting them, in a little petri dish or something, and creating these children in labs. All right, this species is created that way, in exactly the way that artificial reproductive, which I'm going to write an article about soon, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because they live totally in a technological world. Okay, it's very advanced, much more advanced than we have. They can put their hand on a machine and visualize what they want, and the machine will spit out that thing. Okay, their living situation is basically a box, which is what's being created now, these boxes where you can go in and, you know, just wave your hand and the water starts flowing, or, like what they're doing to us right now. Okay. Like, God forbid we should have to flush a toilet. No, we're just going to stand up and lights will flash and the toilet flushes. Okay. That's
Alexa,
how
flush the
they
toilet. Right.
That's how they live. This is
Yeah.
what they want to turn us into, right? They're fiercely jealous of us because we are brought forth from the Creator, because we have the power of love within us and the power to create, which they don't. You see, they use technology to make up for their deficits. They don't have the capacity for telepathy, to tune into other people's minds and feelings and understand what they're going through. So they use their devices, to try to read our neurons. Look at what they have to go through to put up this grid to try to trap us all in this frequency zone. Look at the amount of energy, and we participate. We're out there climbing up the towers, putting these antennas on. This is a problem. And why are we doing it? Because we're under mind control, because we have become like robots, totally disconnected from our soul. The meantime, our soul's screaming, hello, what you're exposing yourself to, it could kill you. I have pictures in my book of these men that were up on a water tower, right? They were hired to clean the water tower. There's microwave transmitters all over the tower, and there's a guy hanging dead off the tower. And the
Wow.
two other guys collapsed on the tower because that water, that microwaved water, right, it's extreme heat. The amniotic fluid in the baby's environment is extremely heated. Okay, the cerebral spinal fluid that goes throughout our body is extremely heated. This is microwave heating. All right, we're being cooked. Our children are being cooked, and we're being cooked. Our whole world is being cooked. But see, they can live in it. They're machines. Really. They
It it
are.
gives the
They are.
it gives the boiling frog analogy a whole new dimension. But I agree, radiation all around is definitely distorting and destroying everything in its path. I know we're coming up here on the hour. Janice, maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit more about where to find your work and what you have coming next.
I have a parenting, well, right now it's turning out to be a teacher training because most of the people coming into the parenting program are really wanting to be teachers. They're wanting to teach this material to those who are going to be bringing the children into this world so that the children can be brought here, basically without exposure to any Luciferian influence. Okay, so that they can come in the image of God. And that's what I teach in a 20-week program, which is coming, the beginning of it is starting in a couple of days. So there's that on my website. That's at the top of my website at birthofanewearth.com. I am in the process of looking for land where we can actually create a radiation safe haven for us, for ourselves, but also for the children to come in so that they're not being exposed so that their parents aren't being exposed and they're not being exposed while they're conceived and gestated and birthed. We have to protect them if we want to bring children that are really carrying all of the gifts that the Creator gave mankind. We've lost a lot of it, even regulating our temperature like all species do. We can't do it because we live in all these artificial climates with the heat and the air conditioning, and we've lost a lot of what should come naturally to us by living in this artificial world. So there's that, and looking for the land and really wanting to create this place on the earth and looking for people that would be interested to participate in such a creation. My books are on my website at birthofanewearth.com. I also have a radiation website called radiationdangers.com, which right now is not loading. I'm in touch with my web guy to get this fixed. It's been 2 days. But I got a lot of information about the radiation issue in my books and also on that website. So That's what I'm up to right now. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We didn't get to talk much about the birth protocols. I would have liked to go deep into the topic of circumcision and cord clamping and C-section birth and episiotomies and epidural anesthesia. And I mean, all of the stuff that they're doing.
Well, that just means we're going to have a part 2 in the near future. So let's just plan
I'm
on that
ready.
Here, here.
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there's so much more we could talk about. I feel like this was just an introductory conversation and a good one at that. And let's definitely come back and talk more about those birth procedures because I think that's an important subject.
For
But
people,
yeah,
yeah.
thank you for all the references. I'm sure our listeners will go and find your website and hopefully order some of your books. And I also have to say, another fellow member of the Shadow Band Library, really happy to see your work getting put there. And hopefully that's also helping you raise awareness with all the research that you've done.
Let me say
Good
one
to,
more thing about something you guys should know. As I said, I did a talk in 2016 on how they manipulated us sexually, where I bring in the Kinsey issue. So if you go to YouTube, it's actually still there. It's called Satanic Sex and Porn. I didn't come up with that name, but that's what the Free Your Mind people came up with, Satanic Sex and Porn. So if you want to understand the path that they took to get us to where we are sexually, look at that video. That's a very important talk. And I have a DVD set on my website covering that topic as well. So, yeah. And working with the Shadow Band people, with Agent and with MG, I'm really appreciating their work. This all comes together really beautifully.
absolutely. Good to have you as a sister in arms and definitely
Okay.
look forward to the next conversation. This has been, like I said, a good part 1, but we look forward to the part 2. Jake, any parting thoughts from your side?
Yeah, too many. So I'll just reiterate my thanks for Janice for being our guest today and look forward to our continuing conversation. It really comes down to, like she said, disassociation in the birth process. We're disassociating from each other and from our connection to the creator. And that's what this whole program is designed to do. We have their playbook. What we need to do is practice associating with each other, and reconnecting with each other, reconnecting with the creator. And the answer is love.
And it's also healing
that's
our
our
birth
weapon.
trauma. We
Yeah.
got to heal our birth trauma so that we don't repeat it, because traumatic repetition is very common. So we want to heal our birth trauma. By the way, the parenting program, there are scholarships being offered for people that are interested in this topic. Reach out to me. It's coming up soon, and there are scholarships for people who can't afford. So if you want to go deeper into this material, you can.
Great. Excellent. We'll send everybody to birthofanewearth.com and they can find
Thanks, guys.
everything about your parenting classes and your education, books and DVDs, and keep up your amazing output.
But
Hear,
good to
hear.
meet you guys. Right on. Thank you.
Thanks again, Janice.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.